Shannon Phillips, a white woman and former regional manager of a Starbucks store, won a whopping $25 million after she was fired, allegedly because of her race. Phillips filed the lawsuit against the popular coffee shop chain after she was let go amid a 2018 arrest controversy of two black men at a Starbucks in Philadelphia's Rittenhouse Square neighborhood, one of the locations she oversaw.
Fast forward to this week, a court determined Starbucks violated her civil rights by firing her as a consequence of the Rittenhouse Square episode because allegedly she was white and ordered them to pay up. This is the incident in 2018 was two black men were at a Starbucks. They had ordered. They were waiting for their orders. Hadn't gotten them yet. One of them asked to use the restroom. I guess whoever the employee was there thought they were not paying customers. Asked them to leave. It got combative. The police were called and they were arrested. And that part of it appeared on video, and that went viral. And it was very, it was like, look at racist Starbucks, et cetera. Starbucks reacted by closing 8,000 stores for a day to have, that sort of implicit bias training, which actually has there's been a lot of criticism of it, kind of a DEI stuff that does this particular training model actually even work or help mitigate bias is very unclear. They also fired this regional manager, this woman who's white, and sued, and then she filed a discrimination claim saying that they were clearly looking to scapegoat a specifically white person. So she filed a racism discrimination claim, and then she won. And it was apparently a jury issue. She won a $25 million verdict, which is huge. I think it goes to show how silly some of the DEI framework.
Wait a minute. Specifically, she won because there were two managers, a black manager and a white manager,
right.
And the black manager wasn't fired, and she was. And I think there was a difficulty explaining why that choice had been made, other than that they were trying to scapegoat specifically a white manager.
Right.
So I don't know that this is a whole DEI thing. It was a bad management decision. This is a labor issue, if anything, where you can't fire people without cause to scapegoat them without making some argument about their actual behavior being inappropriate.
Well, and you can't fire someone because of their race, period.
Well, yes.
Right.
Yeah. They were looking, I want to be really clear. They didn't fire her because they think white people are lazy, or they think white people are criminal, or they think white people are stupid.
No, because
wait a minute. This is important to note, because because of their race umbrella, it is not the same thing. It's bad, and you can't fire and scapegoat someone just because they're white. But when black people and other historically marginalized groups are making the case and using anti-discrimination law to protect themselves against employment decisions that are made on the basis of their race, it's because they are being discriminated against because people believe that they have inherent characteristics, personality traits because of their race that make them less good employees than white people. And I just want to make it clear that that's a different thing. Nobody's alleging that this woman is genetically, inherently, intellectually, or culturally inferior because she's white. She was scapegoated because there was a big media event of racism that did in fact happen at Starbucks, where a manager did in fact call the police on two black people who were paying customers, and they were in fact arrested. But it wasn't that it was this woman's fault, and it was unfair to fire her as a consequence.
Right. She was treated as we need a white person to punish for this, so that's why it rose to a race discrimination issue. Yeah. Which is anyway, I just thought it was a kind of interesting story. It's a massive settlement number. That was of the compensatory damages or the punitive damages. I'm going to look it up. I'm not sure which. I saw it getting a lot of attention. I remember that incident happening because I think I wrote about the bias training they put. 8,000 stores was actually a lot of Starbucks stores to be closed at one time. And there's a lot. Jesse Singal has done a lot of reporting and talking to experts on that specific the implicit bias training module, and how there's some evidence. There's not a lot of evidence that it works to actually reduce people's biases, and I believe there's actually some evidence. If anything, it shows that it makes people more
So what do you think
to
happened
have
in the
biases.
original case? of the two black men sitting
Well, I mean,
in
you
the
said it was an
store.
obvious incident of racism. I mean, racism would be.
Oh, I don't remember saying that. But I'm asking you what you think happened. Why were the two police called on two paying customers sitting in a store waiting for their third business associate to show up?
I guess the employees didn't know that they were paying customers.
Why would they suspect that they weren't? Are the police, have you ever sat in a Starbucks before ordering, waiting for someone, maybe on a blind date or something, and have the cops ever been called on you?
No, but I have been told I can't use the restroom, and I'm like, I'm ordering coffee. That's happened.
Did they call the cops on you after you
They did not
asked?
call the cops on me, but I didn't make a scene of it. So.
They didn't make a scene either. That's not the fact pattern.
I think the fact pattern is that they got combative. That they refused to. They refused to leave.
Yeah, they sat back down at their
Right.
table and continued waiting for their friend that they had, their business partner actually, that they were arranging to meet with. And then they called the police as a consequence. This
Yeah,
manager
calling
called
the police was not a good move in this case,
Yeah,
or
so
in many
the question
cases.
is-
Often employees are not supposed to call the police, period. I don't know if that's the policy at Starbucks.
Yeah, so I don't know. I guess it's a big black box of why it is that these two guys had the police called on them while sitting at a Starbucks when that's not something that generally happens to people. How will we ever know, I guess? It's just a shame that some people completely randomly get the police called on them for engaging in the same kind of consumer activity that most Americans enjoy on a regular basis.
Well, I mean, if you're asked to leave an establishment, you should leave.
Yeah, no matter what, right?
Yeah.
We don't have a whole series of anti-discrimination laws
Well-
that say that you can't selectively ask people to leave.
I mean, people get asked. People of all races get asked to leave establishments when they're being.
This
unruly.
gets to the point of the issue. It's very difficult to prove anybody's motives.
Sure.
So if you're comfortable with that from a civil libertarian perspective, that we live in a world where two men can go and sit down at a Starbucks waiting for their third to show up and have the police called, and they were in fact arrested and taken to jail, handcuffed and taken to jail.
They shouldn't have. Well, it sounds like the wrongdoing was on those employees, right?
Yeah.
Not on the person who got.
I would also argue on the police, who maybe should have assessed the situation and tried to come up with some cause before handcuffing people and taking them to jail, other than the statements, the subjective statements of these
I mean, I'd
staffers.
have to review the video footage again to know exactly how it went down. Based on the description of the facts, there's no reason for anyone to be arrested or go to jail, or even the police to be involved, period, unless there was some kind of altercation. But,
Well, we know there was no altercation.
Right, so it was wrong to take that course of action. I don't know. What are you trying to get me to say or concede or admit here?
Like, we live in a world where it's like, is there ever a case where anybody thinks that anything could maybe be racially motivated? Ever. Like, I just
Sure.
want to know, can it ever be the case? I don't know what's in anybody's head. And one of the managers that called the police on this guy is black. But the thing about the implicit bias tests, which were interesting, was that everybody has implicit bias. I took those tests too. I also have an implicit anti-black bias. We live in America where we're all showed the same exact information about black. Yes, I took the test and got the bias. Everyone takes the test and gets the bias. This is not some referendum on white people being evil or something. We live in a country that tells us messages about who we are interacting with on a daily basis. We meet women and presume things about their strength or their interests. We meet, black people or Latino people make presumptions about what they're interested in, what kind of music they like. You meet, Asian Americans, make presumptions about their interest in certain academic pursuits. And to sit here and lie and pretend that we don't all come with these stereotypes, I think it's delusional. Of course, we all have stereotypes, and it affects our behavior in certain ways that aren't always productive. I think it's not wrong that what's unethical is not having the stereotype. It's not having that instinct. We all deal with that. But it's engaging with what your first instinct might be and thinking, well, maybe I should reevaluate this situation because I know how stereotyping leads to bad outcomes and I don't want to be a part of that.
Sure. I mean, there are people of different backgrounds. Depending on what your background is, there are different cultural kinds of music and art, and we talk a lot when the cameras aren't rolling about what food we like and what music we like, and there are stereotypes, not that they're just common to that culture. That doesn't mean you necessarily fit into that or you like the same things as all those people
and I think that's
by
the problem
you. But
here.
it's okay to recognize the cultural similarities that people of similar backgrounds can share in some cases, but oftentimes do not fit.
Right,
or
and
do
so
not
this
share.
is a question.
That doesn't make you biased, I don't think.
When the managers, one of them was black, but when the managers saw those two men sitting at a table at a Starbucks, were they thinking, oh, these are two guys waiting for a business associate? Mm-hmm. Or were they thinking, these are vagrants who are not supposed to be here and aren't going to pay? And why, should they have, and it was their responsibility as a manager at the Starbucks store, and I think that they should be trained on this. I don't care what acronym you put on it. Starbucks employees and employees everywhere should be trained to challenge their presumptions about who isn't and who isn't a paying customer and who does and doesn't get to sit in their store, to ensure that they don't jump to a conclusion that potentially because two men are black, that they're not supposed to be where they are and that they won't be legitimate patrons of a company.
We'll leave it there. More Rising right after this.